21 years ago, the vessel Joyita, along with its entire crew, vanished during a short voyage on Beaver Lake, disappearing without a trace, leaving their families devastated and a small community haunted ever since. Authorities suspected it was a maritime accident, even raising questions about the sole surviving crew member, but with no bodies, no wreckage, and far too few clues to pursue, the investigation ultimately reached a dead end. However, throughout all those years, one female investigator from the Cold Case Division never accepted this conclusion, clinging to the fragile belief that the truth was still buried somewhere. Then one day, while reviewing long-forgotten old evidence, she noticed a crucial detail that everyone had previously overlooked. A detail that would completely change the case and shock everyone involved in ways no one could have imagined. Before we dive into this shocking story, please let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe. On the morning of October 3, 2005, at Lakeview Marina on the shore of Beaver Lake, the MV Joyita was preparing to depart for a short northern delivery run across the lake. There were 25 people on board, including Captain Earl Miller, engineer Reed Caraway, along with local crew members and passengers. The weather that day was calm, the lake surface flat, temperature around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, clear sky, with no signs of anything unusual. The vessel left the dock at 7:40 a.m., heading toward Norfolk Dam, carrying fuel and supplies for an offshore repair station. In the harbor log, the maintenance engineer noted that Joyita's port engine was weak but still operable. The captain confirmed he accepted the risk due to the urgent delivery deadline. Throughout the day, shore-based radar recorded Joyita moving steadily past checkpoints, with no distress signals transmitted. At 10:25 p.m. that evening, the radio operator at Lakeview Station received a brief message from Joyita: port engine overheating. Immediately afterward, the signal was suddenly lost, and no further contact was established. That night, other vessels in the area reported seeing no lights or smoke, indicating trouble. On the morning of October 4th, when Joyita failed to arrive at the scheduled destination, Lakeview Harbor staff repeatedly attempted radio contact to check on the vessel, but received only prolonged bursts of white noise, with no response from the lake. By early afternoon, after contacting each crew member's family and confirming that no one had returned during the night, Captain Earl Miller's family realized this silence could no longer be explained by ordinary reasons. At 6:20 p.m. that day, the Boone County Sheriff's Office officially received a missing persons report from the captain's family. The information was logged according to standard procedure with a brief entry: MV Joyita lost communication from the night of October 3, 2005, failed to return to dock as planned, 25 persons on board. Immediately afterward, the duty officer forwarded the report to the internal system, creating case number 05AR217, and classifying the incident as overdue vessel, possible missing. Deputy Hank Pritchard, the deputy sheriff responsible for the Beaver Lake area, was assigned as lead investigator and instructed to initiate preliminary verification steps according to the Water Missing Persons Investigation Protocol. On the morning of October 5, 2005, Pritchard arrived at Lakeview Marina to begin the first step of the investigation, verifying all departure data for the MV Joyita. He worked directly with Marina Management, requesting the departure registry log, crew and passenger list, fuel receipts, and the most recent technical maintenance records. The documents showed that Joyita left slip number 3 at 7:40 a.m. on October 3rd, heading north on Beaver Lake, with the intended destination being the Norfolk Repair Station. The fuel manifest recorded 850 gallons of marine gasoline plus 50 gallons reserve, sufficient for multiple days of continuous operation. The accompanying list confirmed 16 crew members and 9 passengers, totaling 25 people on board at departure. All resided in towns around Boone and Marion counties, with no prior criminal records or police history. In the maintenance log, The harbor mechanical engineer noted that Joyita's port engine exhibited vibration and minor oil leakage, recommending against long-distance travel. Captain Miller signed off accepting departure under the condition of continuous monitoring of port engine due to the non-postponable delivery schedule. Pritchard recorded all this information, marking in the file, "Mechanical advisory ignored. Captain aware." He requested extraction of surveillance camera footage from the marina to verify that morning's activity. The footage from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock showed Joyita departing normally, with no signs of argument or distress. Images captured Miller standing in the wheelhouse, Caraway checking engine covers, and the crew untying mooring lines. Pritchard paused the frame at the moment the vessel left view at 7:42, noting, "Departure confirmed, normal behavior." He then interviewed each staff member who worked at the marina that morning. Night shift dock attendant Charles Dunn stated that Miller and Caraway arrived early to check the engines, with no unusual conversations. The fuel attendant reported Joyita was filled to capacity and no one left the dock acting strangely. Another technician mentioned hearing Miller say, "Need to get underway early to avoid late afternoon wind." Pritchard requested detailed weather reports from the Springfield Meteorological Station, temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit, light east-southeast winds, visibility 9 miles, perfect conditions for the voyage. He noted in the report, "No unusual weather factors, low probability of natural incident." Checking the cargo manifest, Joyita carried mechanical materials and 80 empty oil drums. No hazardous or flammable items. Pritchard cross-checked the figures and found no discrepancies. Finally, he inspected the slip area and nearby water surface. No oil sheen, no burn marks, no foreign objects. Spare mooring lines were found neatly stored, indicating no emergency line cutting or collision upon departure. After completion, he concluded preliminarily, Joyita departed legally, with no signs of intent to abandon the area or engage in unlawful activity prior to going missing. He signed the report at 11:45 a.m., filing all documents under Case 05AR217 in the category, Departure Verification Complete. In the summary submitted to county headquarters, Pritchard added a brief note, "Departure occurred normally, port engine had minor issue, no signs of conflict or preparation for permanent departure from the area." These records reinforced the initial assumption that Joyita had left the dock in legal and stable operating condition, with the only risk being a minor technical fault, insufficient to explain a complete disappearance within less than 14 hours afterward. That afternoon on October 5, 2005, after completing departure data verification, Deputy Hank Pritchard returned to the Coordination Center at Lakeview Marina to launch the first large-scale search phase. Under his command, 3 Arkansas game and fish rescue boats, equipped with Humminbird 997C bottom scanning sonar, began moving south across the lake, the area believed most likely for Joyita to have drifted in case of engine failure. Pritchard established the first search coordinates 12 miles from Lakeview Marina, designated as Sector Alpha. The rescue team conducted sonar sweeps in a grid pattern, with lines spaced 200 meters apart, covering depths from 40 to 70 feet. Concurrently, a Bell 206 helicopter from the Water Patrol Unit took off from Harrison Airport at 1:40 p.m., flying clockwise circles around Beaver Lake with an 8-mile observation radius to detect any floating objects that could be buoys, debris, or oil slicks. From the air, the pilot reported over radio, "Water surface flat, no drift trails, no vessel shadows." The sonar team's 30-minute periodic reports consistently noted minor interference due to uneven lake bottom terrain, but no metallic reflections matching the vessel's size. At 3:20 p.m., Pritchard ordered the search area expanded another 3 miles southeast, near the White River Inlet, into the lake. Winds picked up slightly, surface visibility dropped to 6 miles, slowing the sweep process. He stood at the command center, monitoring the large radar screen, with sonar returns appearing scattered like shapeless bright dots. The sonar team leader reported, "No large metallic reflection detected, visibility clear." By 5 p.m., The helicopter returned to base for refueling, having found no debris or floating signs. Rescue boats continued scanning until 7 p.m. before stopping due to fading light and risk of striking submerged rocks. Days total, 9.2 square miles scanned, average depth 56 feet, no anomalous signals detected. Pritchard recorded all data, archived sonar images and radar logs, and prepared the report for the Boone County chief. The final note in the report read, Day 1 search result, negative. No trace of vessel or debris. Recommend expansion toward Norfolk Dam sector for Day 2 operation. He looked out the office window, the distant lake turning ash gray as darkness fell, the marina lights reflecting faintly on the mirror-flat water. The rescue team secured equipment, docked the boats, and prepared for early deployment the next morning. Pritchard closed the case file in silence, adding one brief line to his personal case journal. Vessel location still undetermined. On the morning of October 7, 2005, as the search operation entered its third day, the Coordination Center received an urgent report from a local fisherman named Walter Briggs, who was fishing in a small bay on the north side of Beaver Lake, approximately 11 miles from the Lakeview dock. He had discovered a strange object caught in his net, resembling a heavily water-soaked medical bag. Rescue Team 2 was dispatched to the location shortly after 8:15, guided by the coordinates provided by Briggs. Pritchard arrived at the scene about an hour later and witnessed the recovery process. The bag was identified as a standard marine first aid kit, off-white fabric, with a faded stamp reading, Joyita, first aid. Inside were a few bandages, a broken capped bottle of antiseptic alcohol, an unused roll of gauze, and a heavily blood-soaked piece of cloth that had turned dark brown. There was no smell of gasoline or signs of fire. The entire bag was placed into a sealed plastic evidence box, sealed on site with evidence code E05217A. Water samples from the surrounding recovery area were also collected for comparison, and the GPS coordinates were recorded as 36°2145 in 93°5822. With the natural current flow direction toward the north of the lake, Pritchard prepared a preliminary report, noting that the discovery location aligned with the prevailing wind-driven current from the night of October 3rd, suggesting the bag may have drifted from the Central Lake area. He ordered the evidence transported to the Boone County office, to be stored at low temperature before forwarding to the state forensic lab. That same afternoon, the first aid kit was transferred by specialized vehicle to the Fayetteville laboratory, accompanied by a detailed scene description form. The blood sample was separated and subjected to a quick Kastle-Meyer test, which returned positive for human hemoglobin. Pritchard received the feedback at 21 o'clock that same day, human origin confirmed, sample degraded, DNA sequencing inconclusive. In other words, the blood on the bag was human but had decomposed, with insufficient data for identification. The preliminary forensic report was attached to Case File 05AR217 with the note, blood trace, human, identity undetermined. Back at the office, Pritchard reconstructed a lake map, connecting the point where the first aid kit was found to the known route of the Joyita. The drift pattern matched the northwest wind model from the night of the disappearance, but did not pinpoint the vessel's wreck location. He designated this area as Point Bravo in preparation for an expanded search plan. In the log entry for October 7th, Pritchard wrote concisely, recovered first physical evidence, medical kit from Joyita, containing human blood, insufficient data for ID. Drift pattern indicates northern sector movement. Although the findings did not yet provide a specific direction for resolution, the appearance of the first aid kit confirmed that at least some items from the Joyita had separated from the vessel, reinforcing the assumption that an incident had occurred while the boat was still in the Central Lake area. Pritchard ordered the evidence preserved in sealed storage unit number 2 and issued instructions to send the remaining samples for long-term archiving. Upon completing the paperwork at 23 o'clock, he added to the file, first tangible item recovered since disappearance. Direction of drift, northward. No sign of fire or explosion. On October 8th, 2005. After finalizing the report on the first aid kit evidence, Deputy Hank Pritchard shifted focus to analyzing the MV Joyita's communication data to determine the cause of the signal loss. He personally went to the Lakeview radio station, where all transmission and reception records for vessels on Beaver Lake were automatically logged in the electronic system. With the assistance of a technician, Pritchard extracted the complete log from 18 o'clock on October 3rd to 6 o'clock the following morning. The data showed that Joyita maintained normal communication throughout October 3rd, with 8 routine frequency checks spaced approximately 2 hours apart. All were stable, with no interference or distress signals recorded. At 22:25, the system logged a brief 4-second message, "Port engine overheating," after which the signal was cut off. The Joyita's frequency 2182 kHz remained completely silent thereafter. Shore station attempts to re-establish contact at 22:28 and 22:35 received no response. Pritchard requested the technician check the hydraulic radar log stationed at Norfolk Dam. The chart showed a stable metal reflection at 22:24, moving at 6 knots, which then abruptly disappeared from the screen 1 minute later, approximately 12 miles northwest of the radar station. The return signal decayed linearly, with no wave interference or weather-related signal breakup, ruling out lightning or storm disruption. Analysis of frequency and signal duration indicated the radio had not failed suddenly, but had been deliberately turned off, as the signal strength decreased steadily over about 2 seconds, rather than cutting abruptly, as in a power failure. Pritchard requested further checking of backup data from the Watchdog beacon system installed on Joyita to monitor voltage status. Although the device did not transmit GPS coordinates, the final record at 22:25 showed battery voltage dropping from 12.4 V to 0 V within 1.5 seconds, coinciding exactly with the radio cutoff. Based on these facts, Pritchard concluded that the communication system had been manually deactivated, not due to a technical failure. He proposed 3 possibilities. 1. Someone on board intentionally cut power to avoid interference while repairing the engine. 2. A serious emergency occurred, prompting someone to deliberately shut down the system. 3. The equipment was disabled under duress. To rule out power loss due to fire or explosion, he cross-referenced the rescue team's findings. No oil slicks or floating debris observed on the water surface. Weather radar from the Harrison area recorded average winds of 5 miles per hour, no storms, no lightning. In his October 8 report, Pritchard wrote, "Last radio contact 22:25, no SOS issued, gradual power down observed, radio likely turned off manually." He forwarded a copy of this analysis to the Boone County Command Office and recommended that sonar teams adjust the search area based on the 22:24 radar coordinates where the final reflection vanished. The detailed logs and signal graphs were attached to Case File 05 Air 217, with the note, "Communication logs reviewed, mechanical failure unlikely." Upon completion, Pritchard closed the file and added the final line in his investigation log. The communication system was not broken. Someone turned it off. On the afternoon of October 8, 2005, while Pritchard was still at the Norfolk radar station reviewing communication logs, the Coordination Center in Boone County received an urgent report from the Game and Fish Patrol team. A man had been found drifting near the south shore of Beaver Lake, about 14 miles from the Lakeview dock. The rescue team brought him ashore at 15:20 and confirmed his identity as Reed Caraway, the mechanic of the MV Joyita, listed among the missing persons. He was wearing a navy blue nylon jacket, no life jacket, no shoes. His hair and clothing were only slightly damp, with no signs of hypothermia, despite water temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. When initially questioned on site, Caraway spoke in a hoarse voice, stating that the vessel had encountered trouble on the night of October 3rd. The port engine overheated, then smoke came out. I tried to cut the fuel, but the fire spread fast. I jumped into the water. He claimed to have seen flames on the aft deck before losing consciousness. The rescue team noted no burns, no smoke odor, and no heat discoloration on the skin. After initial treatment, Caraway was transferred to the Boone County Medical Facility for examination. The physician's report at 17 o'clock stated the patient was alert, showing only mild dehydration, stable heart rate, body temperature 36.8 degrees Celsius, completely normal. No fire-related or impact injuries were found. When Pritchard returned to the center at 18 o'clock, he immediately requested a formal statement. The record reads, Caraway stated the vessel caught fire at 22:20. He jumped overboard, drifted for 2 days, and swam to the south shore this morning. He was asked for specific details regarding jump location, wind direction, water temperature, and moon phase timing. Caraway's responses were vague, stating only that the smoke was thick, couldn't see anything. Pritchard cross-checked with the weather radar log for the night of October 3rd, no storms, no electrical phenomena, no smoke or haze recorded. Other vessels on the lake at the time reported no sightings of flames or smoke. Helicopter reports from October 5th and 6th showed no oil slicks or floating ash. He noted in the record, possibility of fire explosion, not corroborated by independent data. When questioned about why his clothing was nearly dry after supposedly drifting for 2 days, Caraway paused, then said he had climbed onto a piece of driftwood that washed ashore. Field checks around the recovery location found no driftwood or debris. The South Shore area also lacked any current pattern that would carry objects from the central lake to that point. Pritchard observed that the man showed no shivering, his skin was not wrinkled from prolonged water exposure, and his hair was only slightly damp with no salt crystallization, indicators inconsistent with long immersion. He concluded the interview at 19:30, initialed the record, and forwarded a copy to the forensic team. In an internal note, he wrote, "Statement inconsistent with objective facts. No evidence of fire, no evidence of prolonged drifting. Clothing dry, physical condition normal, recommend monitoring of witness." After leaving the interview room, Pritchard passed the hallway window overlooking the lake, where the sunset cast long shadows across the calm water, showing no trace of the fire Caraway had described. On his desk, the sonar and radar maps now had a new red marker labeled Recovered Survivor, Reed Caraway, October 5, 08, South Shore. On the morning of October 9, 2005, Deputy Hank Pritchard began compiling all of Reed Caraway's statements together with the technical data collected over the previous 3 days to assess consistency. On his desk lay the Beaver Lake map marked with 3 key coordinates. The Joyita's last radio signal position at 22:25 in the northwest sector, the location where the first aid kit was found drifting northward, and the point on the south shore where Caraway was recovered. When connecting these 3 points, using the recorded wind direction from the night of October 3rd, Pritchard recognized the inconsistency. A northwest wind could not have carried an object from the central lake area southward. Thus, Caraway's drifting to the south shore was nearly impossible. He requested the Norfolk radar technicians to simulate object drift patterns on the lake surface based on actual wind speed and natural currents. The simulation results displayed on screen showed that if a person had fallen overboard at the vessel's last signal position, any floating object would drift eastward or northeastward, completely opposite to Caraway's recovery location. Pritchard recorded in the technical note, "Witness location incompatible with actual current and wind conditions." He further cross-referenced the hydraulic radar data. Joyita's final reflection disappeared 12 miles from Norfolk Dam, while Caraway's recovery point was more than 18 miles south of that, outside the natural drift path. This analysis eliminated the possibility that he had been carried far by the water over 2 days, given the light winds and absence of major eddies on the lake. Pritchard reviewed the medical report again. No burns or injuries, no signs of hypothermia, directly contradicting the account of jumping into the water amid burning flames and drifting 2 days in cold water. He noted in the file, physical condition inconsistent with prolonged water exposure. High likelihood the individual was not continuously in the water During a follow-up interview, Carraway repeated the story with minor variations, adding that he heard an explosion before jumping and saw thick smoke from the engine compartment. When asked to describe the smoke-colored direction of spread and his position at the time, his answers were disjointed and inconsistent. Compared with radar data, there was no evidence of fire, explosion, or heat signatures on the lake surface. He reached a preliminary conclusion. Statement lacks consistency and shows signs of alteration to conceal information. At 15 o'clock, Pritchard submitted an 8-page analytical report to the Boone County Chief, summarizing all contradictions: geographic location, wind direction, physical condition, signal loss timing, and absence of fire evidence. At the end of the document, he wrote, "High probability that witness Reed Carraway provided false testimony or withheld details about the actual incident. Recommend temporary surveillance during investigation." The order was approved the same day. The sheriff's office coordinated with the county medical facility to keep Reed under 24-hour observation under the pretext of post-trauma treatment. Pritchard returned to the coordination center, pinned the Beaver Lake map to the board, and drew a large red circle around the vessel's last signal area. Below it, he wrote briefly in the investigation log, "Discrepancy confirmed, survivor location inconsistent with radar data, subject credibility uncertain." As night fell, the lights of the sonar search boats reflected off the office window onto the dark water. Pritchard quietly gazed out at the expanse, realizing that the single greatest inconsistency in the entire case was the sole surviving witness. On October 10, 2005, Deputy Hank Pritchard focused on verifying the technical specifications of the MV Joyita to clarify its sinking or drifting capability after the loss of signal. He contacted the Arkansas Maritime Registration Bureau in Little Rock to retrieve the registration records and maintenance reports of the Joyita for the past 4 years. The documents received showed that the vessel was 12.3 meters long, 3.8 meters wide, with a maximum load capacity of 8.5 tons, its hull constructed of reinforced fiberglass composite material and lined with sealed foam, providing high buoyancy even when the lower compartments were flooded. In the technical description, the manufacturer clearly stated, "Unsinkable under standard flooding conditions, vessel remains 40% buoyant even if both engines disabled." Pritchard read that line over and over, highlighting it in red on the copy. He compared the data with the Lakeview Harbor engineer's notes about the port engine leaking oil before departure, concluding that the issue did not affect the hull's buoyancy structure. To be certain, he called Marine engineer Frank Yates, who had participated in installing the Joyita's fuel system in 2002. Yates confirmed that even if the hull were cracked, the composite material would still keep at least part of the deck afloat, and unless there was a fire or explosion, the vessel would drift rather than sink completely. Based on this information, Pritchard prepared a preliminary 4-page technical report stating, "Composite foam-lined hull structure. Complete sinking by gravity is highly unlikely. Any disappearance scenario must include the assumption that the vessel remains afloat at an undetected location." He submitted the report to Boone County Chief at 11:15, recommending expansion of the search area northward on the lake, where average depths ranged from 80 to 110 feet, beyond the previous sonar sweep range. At the same time, he submitted a request for support equipment to the Missouri Rescue Team, the unit possessing low-frequency sonar capable of penetrating the lake's thick bottom mud layer. By 1340, the command center approved the expansion plan. Pritchard met with the sonar team leader, directing the establishment of 6 new parallel scan lines extending from coordinates 36°2215 N to 36°2530 in an area known as the Northern Basin. He emphasized the need for special inspection of deep water zones near the old dam edge, where weak currents could trap objects. In the internal report sent the same day, Pritchard added the note, "If the Joyita was built to current standards, the vessel cannot sink completely unless subjected to external force or deliberate destruction." recommend consideration of free drifting or intentional submersion. Engineering teams began transporting sonar equipment to the site that very evening, preparing for the expanded sweep early the next morning. Pritchard filed a copy of the technical report in Case File 05AR217, coded under Engineering Assessment, Buoyancy Analysis. In his investigation log, he added one dry but weighty line: the Joyita was not designed to disappear. On the morning of October 11, 2005, following the expansion plan approved by Deputy Hank Pritchard, the supplemental search operation was launched in the northern basin area of Beaver Lake, extending the coverage by 6 miles beyond the previous boundaries. 4 rescue boats equipped with low-frequency sonar began operations at 6:30, divided into 2 parallel groups running west-east, each line 300 meters apart to ensure full coverage of the deep water zone. Average depth recorded ranged from 85 to 110 feet, with the lake bottom consisting of mud mixed with claystone, causing unstable signal reflections. Pritchard was present on the command vessel, monitoring the images transmitted to the display screen. The sonar bands appeared as thin curved lines, with no distinct bright spots characteristic of large metallic objects. At 8:45, the technical team adjusted the scan frequency down to 80 kHz to improve penetration through sediment, but the results remained negative. On the lake surface, the water was calm, with no oil slicks or gas bubbles typically seen from a leaking wreck. An observation helicopter took off from Lakeview Dock at 9:15, flying northward, photographing the entire search area, but detecting nothing unusual. Pritchard requested water samples at 3 points of varying depth for hydrocarbon analysis. On-site rapid results showed no traces of fuel or industrial chemicals within the checked range. At 11:20, the sonar team leader reported no large metallic reflection detected, background consistent with natural sediment. He immediately requested an additional 2-mile extension eastward, where the lake bottom terrain tended to form natural deep pits, but by midday the results remained unchanged. In the midday summary log, Pritchard wrote, "Completed expanded sonar sweep totaling 15.6 square miles, no metallic reflections, no oil traces, no explosion signs, no evidence of sinking, explosion or collision." As afternoon arrived, the wind shifted slightly, and the water surface rippled gently, reflecting the late-day sunlight. The rescue boats concluded the sweep session at 18:10 and returned to Lakeview Dock. At the command center, Pritchard and the technical team compiled all sonar images, stitching them into a temporary 3-dimensional map of the lake bottom. Not a single indication suggested a large structure matching the Joyita. The end-of-day analysis report concluded, no objects larger than 10 m within the scanned area, no evidence of engine explosion or fire. Reflection pattern uniform, vessel likely intact at another location or deliberately submerged. Pritchard carefully read each line, then typed one final entry into File 05AR217. Search area expanded by 6 miles, negative results. Probable scenario: vessel intentionally submerged or concealed beyond current detection zone. He leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the sonar map covering the desk. The vast expanse of water before him in the data was as empty as the real lake surface outside. No trace whatsoever of the vessel designed to be unsinkable. On October 12, 2005, after the expanded search yielded no trace of any large object in the lake, Deputy Hank Pritchard shifted the investigation toward the financial circumstances and internal relationships of the crew, aiming to determine whether any personal motives were connected to the disappearance. He sent an official request to First Harrison Bank to obtain transaction records of the individuals listed on the MV Joyita manifest. The compiled financial report arrived by late morning. Most crew members' accounts showed small but stable balances with no suspicious activity. However, Reed Caraway's file stood out. Credit debt of $38,000, largely consisting of commercial card debt and short-term loans from a local chain of gas stations. The statement also showed Caraway had been fined twice for fuel storage regulation violations in 2002 and 2003. suspected of gasoline fraud in supply contracts. Pritchard immediately contacted the state maritime transportation department to verify these violations. Records confirmed Carraway had once been suspended from his technical operator license for 1 month due to misuse of company-owned marine fuel. When cross-referencing this with the statement, "The vessel caught fire due to fuel leak," Pritchard noticed a suspicious coincidence. He called the Lakeview dock owner, who had chartered the Joyita for the October 3rd trip, to inquire about internal disputes. The owner stated that Captain Earl Miller had previously complained that the fuel delivered to the Joyita before each trip was consistently short by 15 to 20 gallons compared to the invoice, and he suspected Carraway of selling fuel on the side. Miller had said he would check the entire fuel compartment on this trip and report to the county office if necessary. Pritchard noted in the file conflict between captain and mechanic confirmed prior to voyage, possible confrontation on board. Next, he contacted the office of Benton Marine Supply, the regular fuel supplier for the Joyita. The chief accountant confirmed Carraway was responsible for signing off on fuel deliveries in previous trips, and recently there had been irregularities in delivery tickets. One invoice recorded 900 gallons while actual pumping was only 820. The discrepancy had never been reported. Pritchard requested copies of all documents and invoices related to the Joyita for the past 3 months, attaching them to the case financial file. He created a separate comparison table listing dates, quantities, signatures, and transaction codes. From these findings, Pritchard determined that Carraway had clear financial debt and a strong motive for fraud, while Captain Miller may have discovered the behavior before the disappearance. At the office, he reopened Reed's interrogation transcript and closely read the statement, "I only followed the captain's orders when checking the fuel." The answer now appeared contradictory, as Carraway had no authority to give orders on board. Pritchard drafted a 5-page internal report summarizing the entire financial investigation. Subject: Reed Carraway. Debt $38,000, prior fuel fraud record 2002-2003. Disciplinary suspension confirmed. Captain Earl Miller suspected fuel theft and intended to report. Financial motive for confrontation established. The report, along with bank statements and invoice comparisons, was sent to Boone County Chief by end of day. In his personal log, Pritchard wrote concisely, "If the Joyita could not sink, then someone may have made it disappear. And if anyone had reason to do so, it was Reed Carraway." On October 13, 2005, after completing the financial investigation and identifying irregularities related to Reed Carraway, Deputy Hank Pritchard conducted a formal interrogation session at the Boone County Sheriff's Office. Carraway was brought to the interview room at 9 o'clock, in the presence of 2 administrative witnesses and 1 legal officer. Before starting, he was read his legal rights and confirmed his willingness to cooperate. Pritchard presented the collected evidence, credit debt information, fuel violation history, and the dock owner's statement showing Captain Miller had suspected fraud. When asked about his relationship with the captain, Carraway replied briefly, "We worked together for many years, just occasional arguments over broken equipment." Pritchard asked him to explain in detail the flames he claimed to have seen. Carraway answered confidently, "Fire broke out at the rear, near the port engine compartment. I tried to shut the fuel valve, but was too late. Thick smoke. I jumped overboard." He was then asked, "Did you hear an explosion or smell gasoline?" Carraway paused for a few seconds before saying, "I don't remember, I just heard a hissing sound." Pritchard opened the radar log and wind chart from the night of October 3rd, showing him the northwest wind direction. "You were found on the south shore, 18 miles away. How do you explain that?" Carraway answered awkwardly, "I was carried away, I don't know how far I drifted." The response was unconvincing. Pritchard continued by comparing Carraway's recorded physical condition upon rescue: dry skin, no hypothermia, no burns. When questioned about this, he only said, "I don't know, probably just lucky." The interrogation lasted over 2 hours. Carraway did not change his statement, maintaining all original content from the cause of the fire to how he drifted ashore. No new details were added. Pritchard requested fingerprints for the file and examined Carraway's clothing and belongings, but found no special traces. The medical report confirmed Carraway had no injuries. Skin and hair samples contained no traces of salt or oil, ruling out prolonged water immersion. Although the technical, financial and physical facts were all unusual, they were still insufficient to press charges. There were no witnesses, no direct physical evidence, and the wreck had not been located. Pritchard finalized the interrogation report, signing its statement unchanged. No new information. At 14:30, Carraway was released, but instructed not to leave the area until the investigation concluded. In the report sent to the chief the same day, Pritchard stated, "Subject Reed Carraway cooperated. Testimony remains unaltered. Discrepancies not resolved. No material evidence to substantiate criminal act." The file was temporarily classified as unresolved incident, possible accident. That night, Pritchard sat alone in his office, reviewing the evidence inventory, first aid kit, radar log, and the single unchanged witness statement from beginning to end. He knew the investigation had reached an impasse. On the last page of his notebook, he wrote, "All known evidence exhausted, cause undetermined. File remains open under classification. Accidental sinking, unverified." From mid-October 2005 to early 2006, the investigation into the disappearance of the MV Joyita gradually stalled. After weeks without new evidence, lake searches were scaled back and eventually suspended entirely due to cold weather and costs exceeding the county budget. The technical reports, radar data, witness statements, and physical evidence analyses were compiled into a nearly 200-page file, but no element was convincing enough to classify it as a criminal case. Throughout this period, Deputy Hank Pritchard maintained contact with the Game and Fish Commission and the Fayetteville Forensics Office, but all shared the view that no new investigative leads remained. Additional interviews with Carraway yielded no results. He continued to assert that an engine fire accident caused the vessel's loss, and his survival was pure luck. After consulting with the Arkansas Department of Transportation Safety, the Boone County Sheriff's Office agreed to downgrade the case priority. On February 15, 2006, the Boone County Chief signed the official decision to close case number 05R217, classifying it as accidental sinking, no evidence of foul play. An order to archive all evidence followed immediately. The first aid kit, water samples, radio logs, and radar records were packaged, sealed, and transferred to the Central Storage Facility in Little Rock. Remaining blood samples were preserved in the State Forensics Laboratory freezer per the 10-year regulation. The final summary report stated, "All obtained data indicate a technical accident leading to vessel loss. No evidence of criminal activity or external interference." A copy of the file was sent to the National Maritime Authority for statistical archiving. After the handover confirmation signing, Pritchard sat alone in his office, gazing through the window at Beaver Lake, still mirror calm. He knew he had reached the limit of what could be done. 25 people remained missing without trace. The vessel designed to be unsinkable had never been found. In his final personal report, attached to the file, he wrote in black ink, "Insufficient evidence to establish criminal conduct. All investigative avenues exhausted. Case status, temporarily closed." The next day, he submitted his application for early retirement after 26 years of service, citing health and job stress on the paperwork. The Joyita case was removed from Boone County's priority list and placed in the closed maritime cases category. When the nameplate Pritchard was removed from the office door, the case also faded from the memory of most who had been involved. In the internal system, the final note for case number 05R217 remained a single cold line, "Case closed. Accidental sinking, no evidence of foul play." After case file 05R217 was closed and transferred to the Central Archives in Little Rock, the disappearance of the MV Joyita gradually faded from memory. For more than 6 years, no new reports were added, and no one in the Boone County Sheriff's Office mentioned it anymore, except in routine statistical updates. By 2012, the Arkansas Department of Justice approved a program to reform the investigative system, establishing a special task force named the Cold Case Division under the Arkansas State Police, tasked with reviewing unsolved cases that had seen no progress in more than 5 years, especially missing persons cases where the cause remained undetermined. Thousands of files from counties across the state were transferred to the centralized electronic archive, including the thick gray folder labeled 05R217, the Joyita case. When entered into the database, it was categorized under water disappearances, the group of unresolved missing cases on rivers and lakes. All evidence remained intact: the first aid kit, blood sample, sonar images, technical reports, but all were assessed as insufficient for reinvestigation. For years, it simply sat untouched on shelf 11, row E, among hundreds of other cases marked closed pending review. In early 2017, a forensic data modernization program was implemented, enabling DNA tracing from old samples using next-generation STR techniques. Among the files eligible for reanalysis, 05R217 stood out as a special case because it contained an unidentified human blood sample. At the time, the cold case unit was short-staffed, and the lieutenant in charge of the Northwest region, David Moores, decided to assign the case to a recently promoted young investigator, Detective Sarah Kelton, 29 years old, who had just completed forensic training in Fayetteville. She received the Joyita file in May 2017, its cover already yellowed, many paper documents bearing faint, smudged fingerprints from previous handlers. Her first note in her work journal, dated May 17, read Case 05R217, Missing Vessel Beaver Lake, closed 2006. Evidence intact, human blood sample preserved, recommended for review. She uploaded the entire file to the cold case database, created a digitized copy, and assigned it a new identifier, ARCC 512JY. From that moment, the Joyita case officially returned to the state of Arkansas's reopened under review list. In the internal report for June 2017, the case name appeared alongside 48 other files under active review. No one in the unit at the time knew that this had once been the largest case in Boone County, more than a decade earlier, and no one remembered the name Hank Pritchard, the man who had spent 8 months trying to find a vessel he believed could not sink. In the quiet archive room of the Cold Case Division, that gray file cover was once again placed on a desk, marking the first time in 11 years that the Joyita disappearance was opened for re-examination. In July 2017, after receiving the Joyita file from storage, Detective Sarah Kelton began the evidence inventory process. Wearing nitrile gloves, she opened each evidence box sealed since 2006, noting the codes and conditions. The first box contained administrative documents, radiolog copies, sonar reports, and technical drawings of the vessel. The second box, heavy and thick with dust, was labeled E05217, Medical Kit, recovered October 5, 07. Inside was a yellowed first aid kit, the cotton fabric stiffened by dried salt, rusted medical instruments, and a blood-soaked gauze pad wrapped in plastic. According to the old inventory, the blood sample had been identified as human, but lacked sufficient data for identification. Kelton noted in the new inventory, sample condition, desiccated, intact within sealed pouch. She checked the seal integrity, confirmed it was undamaged, then extracted the gauze portion and placed it in a sterile test tube. She contacted the Fayetteville Forensic Lab directly, requesting retesting using next-generation STR DNA techniques, capable of sequencing genes from samples over 20 years old. The sample was shipped the same day under cold chain preservation, accompanied by the original file and continuous chain of custody documentation. On August 4, Kelton received confirmation of receipt from the lab, along with an estimated analysis time of 3 weeks. While waiting, she reviewed the Joyita crew records, particularly Captain Earl Miller, mentioned repeatedly in earlier reports. All indicators showed he was a rule-following individual, with no unusual behavior, no debts, and no major conflicts except for past complaints about Reed Caraway. On August 28, the analysis results arrived electronically. DNA extracted from blood sample matches genetic profile of subject Miller Earl, confirmed through family reference sample provided 2005. The short line made Kelton pause for a long time. She reopened the 2005 examination report, when identification had been impossible due to technological limitations. Now the results confirmed that the blood in the first aid kit belonged to the captain, and the amount soaked into the gauze indicated significant injury. Accompanying the results was a hemoglobin quantification report. Blood loss consistent with active bleeding at time of deposition. This meant Miller had been injured while the vessel was still operational, not after an accident. Kelton printed copies, stamped them evidentiary update. August 28, 2017 forwarded them to the cold case division head, and added the note, "Human blood confirmed as belonging to Captain Earl Miller, indication of violent incident prior to disappearance." In her personal investigation log, she wrote briefly, "The first piece of evidence from the Joyita has spoken. There is blood, and it is the captain's blood." That same day the original evidence was resealed according to new protocols, coded as ARCC 512JY01, and stored in a dry nitrogen repository. The official report stated, "Re-examination of old evidence using STR-DNA technology has confirmed the blood sample originated from Captain Miller. Evidence of injury occurred prior to the vessel's disappearance. Preliminary conclusion, violence likely occurred aboard the Joyita on the night of March 10, 2005. Upon completing the file, Kelton looked at the old gray cover where the word closed had faded, then added a new line in green ink, reopened. On September 5, 2017, following DNA confirmation that the blood in the first aid kit belonged to Captain Earl Miller, the Arkansas State Police formally approved reopening the MV Joyita disappearance case. The new file was assigned code 05AR217R, marked Reopened Investigation, and re-entered into the cold case database. Detective Sarah Kelton was designated lead investigator, responsible for organizing an interagency team to locate additional physical evidence and determine the vessel's position. In an internal meeting in Little Rock, she presented to the Cold Case Division Command, arguing that the DNA discovery of Miller proved violence had occurred before the disappearance, ruling out a purely accidental event. The new investigation plan included three main objectives: identify probable coordinates of the wreck, re-examine all old evidence with modern technology, and re-interview all relevant persons, including the sole survivor, Reed Caraway. Unit leadership approved expanded funding, permitting cooperation with the FBI and the Missouri Underwater Technical Team's 3D sonar unit. On September 10th, Kelton formed a 6-member investigation team, 2 forensic technicians, 1 sonar data specialist, 1 financial analyst, and 2 field investigators. A temporary office was established in Harrison, just 8 miles from Beaver Lake for convenient access. Kelton began recollecting all 2005 sonar data, converting it to new digital formats for 3D modeling. She worked with FBI engineer Mark Hanley, a specialist in underwater object analysis, who had previously worked on the 2013 Missouri plane crash case. Hanley used new sonar imaging software, capable of reconstructing objects buried under up to 2 meters of sediment. They simultaneously compiled a list of 18 suspected locations based on currents, wind direction, and depths recorded in Pritchard's 2005 log. Kelton paid particular attention to the northern area of the lake, where Pritchard had once recommended expanded search, but which had not been pursued due to technical limitations at the time. On September 20th, she sent an official cooperation request to the FBI Little Rock field office, asking for forensic support and chain of custody management should an object be located. The FBI approved within 48 hours, providing 2 technical advisors and a side-scan Model 4200 sonar unit. By the end of the month, Kelton's team finalized a 3-phase survey plan. Phase 1, full lake bottom scan from 40 to 120 feet depth. Phase 2, analysis of any metallic reflections with artificial structure shapes. Phase 3, recovery sampling if detected. The entire operation was codenamed Operation Joyita Revisit. In the plan submitted to state leadership, Kelton wrote, "Current technology allows us to find what was impossible in 2005. The new DNA data is only the beginning. If the vessel exists somewhere beneath the lake, we will find it." In early October, the survey team moved equipment to Beaver Lake, setting up the coordination station at Lakeview Dock, the very place the vessel had departed 12 years earlier. During the first check, as the 3D sonar screen displayed a never-before-seen detailed bottom terrain map, Kelton stood silently at the command window, feeling that the investigation many had once considered finished had truly begun again. In March 2018, as Operation Joyita Revisit entered its final expanded scan phase, the Beaver Dam management team announced routine maintenance, lowering the lake level by 8 feet to inspect the bottom discharge system. The reduced water level created a rare opportunity for Kelton's sonar team. On the morning of March 9th, during an early scan in the northern sector, the FBI's 3D side-scan sonar detected a large metallic reflection at 45 feet depth, approximately 4 miles from the northwest shore. The reconstructed image showed an object about 12 meters long, tilted 15 degrees to starboard, bow facing east. The reflection surface was uniform, characteristic of a composite hull with metal coating. When the data reached the coordination station, Kelton and engineer Hanley immediately compared the dimensions to the Joyita's technical drawings. Length and deck proportions matched almost perfectly. They designated the coordinates 36°25'42", N 93°57'09", W as sector delta. At 10:25, the Missouri Underwater Technical Dive Team was dispatched to the location. After more than an hour of survey, the underwater camera transmitted live images to the screen, the stern with the faint but still legible lettering, Joyita. Kelton confirmed immediately. Positive identification, vessel located. Recovery operations began the next day. With the assistance of a floating crane and 2 rescue vessels, the hull was secured with high-strength nylon straps and slowly raised through the surface at 16:20 on March 10th. As the deck emerged, covered in thick gray mud, the off-white paint still visible, the structure remained intact with no signs of fire or explosion. Pritchard had once said Joyita was not designed to disappear, and now those words echoed in Kelton's mind as the vessel broke the surface after 13 years. The forensic team conducted an initial examination. The wheelhouse door was locked from inside. The radio hung askew on the console, power cables cleanly cut with a sharp tool. The mechanical clock on the cabin wall had stopped at 22:25, precisely the time of the last recorded signal in 2005. Equipment inside the compartments remained in place, except for the engine hatch cover, which had been forced off its hinges. The port engine control panel was partially disassembled, indicating intervention before the disappearance. The deck surface was clean, no scorch marks, no soot. As the vessel was towed back to Lakeview Dock, a large crowd gathered, witnesses, local police, press, and people who remembered the 2005 disappearance. Kelton ordered the entire scene sealed and posted signs reading Federal Investigation Area, authorized personnel only. The vessel was placed on a temporary cradle in a wind-protected zone and surrounded by 3 layers of security fencing. She recorded in the scene report, "Vessel recovered March 10, 2018. Identification confirmed as MV Joyita, intact hull, no fire or explosion traces. Evidence of manual electrical disconnection. Dashboard clock, stopped 22:25. Inside the wheelhouse, the technical team collected electrical traces and analyzed the cuts on the copper wires, showing clean, sharp tool severance, not thermal damage. Full scene photographs were taken before the vessel was transported to the Fayetteville examination facility. As Kelton finished the report at 1940, a light rain began to fall on the deck. Rainwater ran along the faded gray Joyita lettering, washing away the old mud, as if Beaver Lake itself were returning the missing piece of the story it had silently held for 13 years. On March 11th, 2018. When the technical team began dismantling the interior compartments of the vessel Joyita for inspection purposes, one of the forensic technicians from Fayetteville noticed something unusual in the engine room area. Amid a layer of mud and sludge, more than 20 centimeters thick, a portion of human bone protruded, lodged between the metal bulkhead and the engine shaft guard frame. The area was immediately cordoned off, and all non-essential personnel were evacuated from the vessel. Kelton arrived 10 minutes later and witnessed the forensic team carefully removing the mud layer with wooden spoons, gradually exposing the remaining skeletal torso. Under the cold lighting, the skeleton was nearly complete, with clothing still identifiable as the captain's uniform, featuring brass buttons and a Lakeview logo patch on the shoulder. A distinct round hole was identified in the occipital bone at the back of the skull, approximately 11 mm in diameter. Adjacent to it was a long fracture extending diagonally upward toward the right temple. Inside the cranial cavity, technicians recovered a small gray-black metallic object, suspected to be a bullet projectile. All procedures followed strict chain of custody protocol. The skeleton was secured in an evidence bag, labeled ARCC 512JY02, and transported to the Fayetteville Forensic Facility in a dedicated vehicle. At the scene, Kelton stood silently, recording only one note in her notebook: remains found in engine compartment, probable gunshot wound. 48 hours later, the preliminary forensic report was submitted to the Cold Case Division office. The findings confirmed the recovered object was a .45 ACP caliber bullet, fired from a distance of less than 1 meter, traveling from back to front. Trajectory analysis of the wound indicated the victim was shot while bent forward. The bullet passed through the brain, causing immediate death. DNA samples taken from the femur were compared to genetic records from the 2005 file, yielding a 99.97% match with the sample of Earl Miller, captain of the Joyita. The official autopsy report, signed by Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Michael Raines, stated clearly: cause of death, gunshot wound to occipital region, close range, manner of death, homicide. In an additional conclusion, he noted the absence of any burn marks, soot, or other mechanical damage on the bone, ruling out the possibility of an engine explosion. Kelton read the report on the morning of March 13th in the temporary meeting room, the fluorescent light reflecting off the photograph of the skull, with its bullet hole as stark as a fateful signature. She immediately drafted an internal notification to the FBI field office in Little Rock. Homicide confirmed. Victim identified as Captain Earl Miller. Gunshot wound .45 caliber, close range. A copy of the report was submitted to the Arkansas State Department of Justice office, officially changing the status of Case 05AR-217R from missing vessel to homicide investigation. The vessel Joyita was no longer the scene of a disappearance. It had become physical evidence of a murder committed on the night of October 3, 2005. Kelton walked across the wet deck, looking down at the now sealed engine compartment covered with evidence tarps, feeling the heavy weight as fragments of truth began to take shape. In her handwritten supplemental investigation log, the final line read, "Violent act confirmed. Victim died from gunshot to the back of the head. This is no longer an accident." On March 14, 2018, immediately after forensic results confirmed that Captain Earl Miller had been murdered, Detective Sarah Kelton's investigative team expanded the survey area around the Joyita recovery site. The objective was to determine whether additional remains or evidence might be scattered within the surrounding vicinity. The Missouri Technical Dive Team, in coordination with the FBI, conducted 3 dive passes in depths ranging from 40 to 60 feet, using low-light cameras and handheld sonar positioning. During the second dive, at 10:25 a.m., a diver reported a suspected human bone fragment 43 meters southwest of the vessel's position, embedded in 20 centimeters of fine silt. After clearing the area, the upper portion of a skull, along with shoulder and arm bones, gradually became visible. Upon recovery, the remains were brought ashore and assigned the code ARCC 512JY03. Just 1 hour later, approximately 70 meters northeast of the vessel, the underwater camera detected another bright white mass against the rocky bottom, identified as a human pelvis. The expanded survey continued meticulously, and by 2 p.m., a second complete skeleton was recovered, coded ARCC 512JY04. Both sets of remains were transferred to the Fayetteville Forensic Facility the same day. Kelton stood on the command deck monitoring the incoming data stream, keenly aware that the case had far exceeded its original boundaries. The preliminary forensic report delivered on the morning of March 16 concluded the first skeleton belonged to a male, aged approximately 35-40, with a sternum fracture, broken ribs, and a .45 caliber bullet wound through the chest. The second skeleton was a younger male, around 28 years old, with right side cranial trauma and a similar bullet trajectory. DNA samples matched the 2005 crew roster, positively identifying the two missing crew members, technician Mark Ortiz and assistant engineer Daniel Green. Rain's forensic report stated clearly, both victims died at approximately the same time, with similar shot spacing, same .45 caliber firearm, fired from under 1 meter. Based on bone degradation, he determined the time of death aligned with the night of October 3, 2005. Upon reading the results, Kelton immediately drafted an update for the Arkansas State Department of Justice. 3 victims confirmed: Miller, Ortiz, Green, all killed by .45 caliber gunshot, close range. Estimated time of death consistent with March 10, 2005 disappearance. The case was reclassified as homicide, multiple victims. During the internal briefing that afternoon, Kelton presented the sequence of evidence, locations of the bodies around Joyita, bullet trajectories, and the likelihood that the perpetrator acted inside the vessel. She emphasized that the wound patterns indicated all 3 were shot in rapid succession within a confined space, most likely on the bridge or in the engine room. FBI specialists agreed that the scene was consistent with a mass killing aboard the vessel, followed by it being set adrift and then sinking. The official confirmation document from the Arkansas State Police, signed on March 17, 2018, formally stated, Case 05IR217R, reclassified as homicide investigation, multiple victims. Primary objective: identify shooter and reconstruct event timeline. On the investigation board at the Harrison Command Center, Kelton placed 3 name cards beneath the red header victims, March 10, 2005, Earl Miller, Mark Ortiz, Daniel Green. That night, she finalized the daily report. The last line read, "The scope of the case has changed. This is no longer a disappearance. This is a mass murder on the water." On March 18, 2018, after forensic analysis officially classified the Joyita case as a mass homicide, Detective Sarah Kelton directed the team to shift focus to detailed analysis of physical evidence recovered from the vessel. The goal was to find tangible traces that could directly link to the perpetrator. At the Fayetteville Forensic Facility, technicians began examining the wheelhouse cabin where the communication radio cables had been severed. The copper cable was removed from the console and placed under an electron microscope. Results showed a clean, sharp cut with slight compression on the metal edges, characteristic of a fine-edged utility knife, not damage from fire or impact. The uniform compression indicated the cutter operated from a stable position, deliberately and with knowledge of the power source location. The report noted, cut made by fine-edged utility knife, 1 pass deliberate. Simultaneously, specialists collected fingerprint samples from the radio surface, throttle lever, control panel, and cabin door handrail. Although some prints were smudged by mud, 4 clear minutia points on the frequency adjustment knob were sufficient for analysis. The automated AFIS system returned a match to the fingerprint record of Reed Caraway from the 2005 interview file, with a probability of 1 in 72 million. Kelton received the report and read the conclusion multiple times. Partial latent fingerprint, 4-point match to Caraway, Reed confirmed. This was the first time in 13 years that Caraway's name reappeared in physical evidence rather than merely in witness statements. The lab continued analyzing the grease residue around the control panel. The oil sample separated into 3 layers: surface, beneath the cut, and absorbed into the copper wire. Chemical spectroscopy identified it as SAE-15W40 engine oil with molybdenum additive, the exact formulation used in Joyita's documented maintenance, a type uncommon in civilian commercial use. The accompanying report noted, grease sample consistent with lubricant used in Joyita maintenance logs, probable transfer from operator's hand at time of cutting. In other words, the person who cut the radio cables had engine oil on their hands, something only a technician or someone directly working on the engines would have. When combined, the physical evidence, fingerprint and grease analysis formed a complete logical chain. Kelton requested a reconstruction of the wheelhouse layout and cut locations to determine the operator's movement path. 3D scans showed the cutter standing to the right of the console, at a height matching Caraway, performing the action quickly and precisely. No trace of a second person was found in that area. In the comprehensive 8-page forensic summary, Dr. Rains concluded, evidence suggests manual disconnection of radio using utility knife. Latent fingerprint and grease trace consistent with Caraway, Reed, mechanical operator of Joyita. No trace of other personnel on control panel. The report was signed and forwarded to the Cold Case Division the same day. Kelton printed a copy and immediately pinned it to the central evidence board beside the photograph of the .45 bullet hole in Earl Miller's skull. Beneath the 2 images, she wrote in red ink, "Connection confirmed." From a scattered set of clues, the technical details had now aligned perfectly. The radio was deliberately disabled, the cable cut by someone with technical knowledge, and every trace led back to the same name that had stood on Lake Beaver the night of October 3, 2005. On March 20, 2018, immediately after receiving the physical evidence examination results confirming that the fingerprint and grease marks on the radio belonged to Reed Caraway, Detective Sarah Kelton began tracking down this man. She queried the Arkansas State Civilian Database and confirmed that Caraway was still residing in the town of Eureka Springs, approximately 60 miles southwest of Beaver Lake. His registered address was 142 Maple Hollow Road, a suburban wooden house located deep in the forested mountains of Carroll County. Records showed that he had transferred the head of household designation to his wife since 2010, but remained the primary resident. Kelton contacted the Arkansas State Firearms Licensing Agency to check his gun records. The results showed that Caraway legally owned a Colt Government Model .45 ACP, serial number 193542C, registered in 2003 and with its permit renewed in 2011. This was the exact caliber, matching the bullet recovered from Captain Miller's skull. The report also noted that this firearm had never been surrendered or reported lost. Continuing to review his criminal history, Kelton discovered that Caraway had been prosecuted in 2003 for marine fuel fraud while working as a technician for Benton Marine Supply, resulting in a 6-month suspension and an administrative fine, though the record was expunged after 2 years due to insufficient criminal evidence. The disciplinary file copy detailed the conduct, misuse of company fuel, diverting a portion for off-contract resale. Everything matched the information in Hank Pritchard's 2005 report. Kelton compiled a summary table with 3 items: physical evidence from the vessel Joyita, firearm technical data, and financial records, all pointing to the same individual. She called the Boone County Prosecutor's Office to request a search warrant for Caraway's private residence to seize potential evidence, including the Colt .45 and any materials related to the Joyita. At 11:30, she submitted the formal request, along with the examination report, to the Chief Judge of Carroll County District Court. The summary document clearly stated, reasonable cause established linking Reed Caraway to homicide of Earl Miller and crew through fingerprint material trace and weapon caliber match. Request search warrant for residence 142 Maple Hollow Road. The search warrant was signed and approved at 15 o'clock the same day, in accordance with state law. The FBI field office in Little Rock was notified and dispatched 2 agents to assist in overseeing the execution. Kelton planned the operation, dividing the team into 3 groups. Team 1 for the primary approach via Maple Hollow Road, Team 2 to secure the rear access connected to the Forest Road, and Team 3 responsible for documenting the scene on video. According to residency records, Caraway was currently living alone. His wife had left Arkansas in 2015. Neighbors described him as quiet, reclusive, often working on machinery in the backyard. Utility data showed low electricity consumption, indicating no large appliances were in regular use. She printed satellite maps, marked access points, and estimated timing, 7 o'clock the next morning. March 21st, the warrant would be executed. In the end-of-day report to the Cold Case Division leadership, Kelton wrote, "Subject located, Eureka Springs, Carroll County. Licensed firearm, .45 ACP, same caliber as victim loaned. Prior record fuel fraud 2003, consistent with historical motive. Search warrant, approved by District Court. Operation scheduled March 21, 2018. As she signed her name at the bottom of the confirmation line, the Joyita case had officially moved out of the indirect investigation phase and into the action phase, with the sole objective of verifying whether the former technician was truly the one who made that unsinkable vessel disappear beneath Beaver Lake. On the morning of April 10, 2018, pursuant to the search warrant approved by Carroll County District Court, the interagency investigation team led by Detective Sarah Kelton executed the warrant at 142 Maple Hollow Road, the residence of Reed Caraway on the outskirts of Eureka Springs. Operations began at 6:45, with participating personnel consisting of 3 Boone County Sheriff's deputies, 2 FBI agents, and 1 forensic technician. The area was cordoned off within a 200-meter radius, and the main access road was blocked by 2 police vehicles. The 2-story wooden house sat secluded among pine trees, with the front yard cluttered with mechanical tools, old oil drums, and engine frames. Caraway was ordered to exit the house and was clearly informed of the warrant. He did not resist, merely standing silently, watching the team enter. The search began on the ground floor, with priority given to the garage area due to signs of frequent use. After 15 minutes, an officer discovered, inside a metal cabinet next to the workbench, a Colt government model, .45 ACP handgun, serial number 193542C, perfectly matching the registered permit data. Next to the firearm were 2 boxes of ammunition, 1 half-full box still bearing the original 2003 seal. The weapon was seized, the magazine removed, sealed in a nylon evidence bag, and assigned evidence code ARCC 512JY05. While searching the tool bench area, technicians found a gray-silver handheld utility knife with oxidation marks and small scratches along the blade edge. Test cuts confirmed that the blade dimensions perfectly matched the cut marks on the radio's electrical wires from the Joyita. The knife was separately sealed, coded ARCC 512JY06. In the second drawer of the filing cabinet, Kelton discovered a bundle of old fuel invoices clipped in a plastic folder. All were printed from Benton Marine Supply, dated 2005, but the ink and signatures were inconsistent. Several slips showed 900 gallons of gasoline, while the company's retained copies recorded only 820. Nearby were 3 carbon copy sheets bearing forged signatures of E. Miller. The document set was seized, coded ARCC 512JY07, with the note forensic handwriting comparison pending. Additionally, the team recovered a navy blue protective jacket embroidered with the Joyita logo on the left chest, folded inside a wooden box in the attic. The collar bore grease stains and a faint reddish-brown spot. A fabric sample was cut and sent for presumptive blood analysis. At 8:20, the entire property was swept with metal detectors and thermal cameras. No dangerous objects or hidden persons were detected. After nearly 2 hours, the search concluded, with a total of 7 items of evidence collected and inventoried. Kelton read back the list, signed along with 2 FBI agents as witnesses, confirming the chain of custody remained intact. All evidence was transported to the Fayetteville Crime Lab the same day in a dedicated vehicle with sealed boxes equipped with tracking chips. The quick report sent to Cold Case Division stated, "Search executed October 4, 2018. Items seized: Colt .45 handgun serial 1935542C, utility knife, consistent with radio wire cut, forged fuel invoices bearing captain's signature." All evidence sealed under federal chain of custody. As the vehicle pulled away from Maple Hollow Road, Kelton glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Carraway still standing motionless on the porch, hands in his pockets, sunlight falling across the face of the man she knew would soon have to confront evidence he could no longer deny. On April 16, 2018, all evidence collected during the search of Reed Carraway's residence was transferred to the Fayetteville Forensic Laboratory for ballistic and DNA analysis. The testing process followed federal standards under the supervision of 2 FBI technicians and a Cold Case Division representative. The Colt Government Model .45 ACP, serial number 1935542C, was examined first. After cleaning, the barrel was inspected under an optical microscope, revealing clear 6-groove right twist rifling with an average depth of 0.13 mm. The bullet recovered from Captain Earl Miller's skull, designated ARCC 512JY02B, was placed parallel with test rounds fired from this same Colt in the controlled test chamber. Scanning electron microscope images showed complete matching of the rifling marks across all 6 segments, with deviation under 0.004 mm, technically a perfect match. The examination report stated, bullet recovered from victim's skull matches rifling characteristics of Colt .45 serial 1935542C, with full concordance. No other weapon exhibits same pattern. This confirmed that the fatal bullet was fired from Carraway's gun. Next, the utility knife recovered from the garage, coded ARCC 512JY06, underwent DNA analysis. The dried brown stains along the blade were sampled and extracted using EDTA solution. PCR results showed a complete genetic sequence match with Earl Miller's DNA profile on record in the cold case database. The result was signed by forensic pathologist Dr. Morgan Tate, confirming human blood detected on blade. DNA match 100% to Miller Earl, captain of Joyita. Additionally, grease marks on the knife handle were identified as AC15W40, matching the maintenance oil sample from Joyita and the grease found on the radio. The technicians compiled the results into a comprehensive 17-page forensic report. In the conclusion section, they stated, evidence establishes direct connection between suspect Reed Carraway and homicide victims. Ballistic match between Colt .45 and recovered bullet is conclusive. DNA match on knife confirms presence of victim's blood on suspect's tool. A copy of the report was sent to the Arkansas State Prosecutor's Office the same day. Kelton received the documents on the afternoon of April 17, flipping through each comparative bullet rifling photograph, feeling that 13 years of fragmented investigation by multiple generations of police had finally concluded in a few cold steel grooves. In the internal meeting the next morning, she briefly presented, the bullet in Captain Miller's skull matches Carraway's gun, and Miller's blood is on the utility knife in his house. This is no longer supposition. This is concrete evidence. The compiled report was submitted to the State Department of Justice under the title Forensic Correlation Report, April 2018. The document concluded with the signature of Lab Director Raines. Scientific conclusion: Reed Carraway fired the fatal shot and was in physical contact with the victim prior to death. Probability of alternate source: none. With this data, the sole suspect in the Joyita case had been identified through irrefutable physical evidence. Kelton signed the final section of the file with a short handwritten note, Carraway, confirmed. On April 20, 2018, after the ballistic and DNA results were confirmed, Detective Sarah Kelton collaborated with the FBI crime scene reconstruction team to recreate the entire cabin interior of the MV Joyita using a 3D model. Sonar data, technical drawings, and crime scene photographs were imported into the Baltrax physical reconstruction software, enabling precise calculation of bullet trajectories, shooting angles, and the position of each victim at the moment of the crime. The Joyita's control cabin measured 2.3 meters wide, 3.8 meters long, and 1.9 meters high, with the control panel at the front, radio on the right, and the rear deck exit door offset to the left. The model showed that the bullet hole in Earl Miller's occipital bone followed a back-to-front trajectory with a 12-degree downward angle, corresponding to the shooter standing directly behind the captain's chair, holding the gun at chest height. The bullet passed through the skull and lodged in the forward wooden bulkhead, where the clock had stopped at 22:25. Analysis of the bullet height and direction confirmed that Miller was seated at the controls at that moment, head slightly bowed, while observing the electrical panel, consistent with being shot unexpectedly from behind. After the first shot, the loud report in the confined space likely caused crewmen Ortiz and Green to rush up from the engine room. Deck traces showed a 0.6-meter skid mark and an old bloodstain at the cabin exit doorway, matching the location where Ortiz's fractured ribs were found. The bullet trajectory through Ortiz's left chest ran diagonally downward to the right at a 25-degree angle, indicating he was shot while charging forward from approximately 1 meter away. In the model, Ortiz's body position aligned with a cracked floor area where water had seeped in, explaining why his skeleton was later discovered more than 40 meters from the vessel, possibly carried out as the ship slowly sank. The final victim, Daniel Green, was determined to have died at the rear cabin doorway, with a right side head wound from a bullet traveling horizontally at a lower 15-degree angle, suggesting the shooter was kneeling or half-seated when firing. Consecutive shot marks, with spacing between the three bullets ranging from 0.9 to 1.2 meters, indicated the shooter did not move much and acted within a short time frame of under 30 seconds. Based on the clock stopping at 22:25, the technical team determined this was the moment of the first shot, which jarred the metal mechanism and caused the second hand to jam. After firing, the perpetrator cut the radio wires to prevent distress signals, then likely went below to the engine room, opened valves to flood the bilge, aiming to slowly sink the vessel and create a false missing scene. Trajectory and movement sequence analysis established the order of deaths: Miller first, Ortiz second, and Green last. The 34-page crime scene reconstruction report, accompanied by 3D simulation images from various deck angles, was submitted to the Arkansas State Department of Justice and filed under Case 05-R217R. In the conclusion, lead technician Paul Hanley wrote, "Trajectory reconstruction establishes sequential homicide pattern inside cabin, Miller shot first from behind, followed by Ortiz and Green in quick succession. Total time frame estimated under 45 seconds. Kelton stood watching the three-dimensional projection of the cabin, where three faint human figures representing the victims were simulated in their falling positions, surrounded by bright points marking bullet locations. As the software reversed the sequence to replay the initial moment, the clock in the model froze precisely at 22:25. She typed the final line into the record, "Reconstruction complete. Sequence verified, Miller, Ortiz, Green." Radio cut and power down followed immediately. Event lasted less than 1 minute. On the morning of August 20, 2018, nearly 5 months after the forensic examination results and crime scene reconstruction confirmed the chain of murders aboard the Joyita, an arrest warrant for Reed Caraway was approved by the Carroll County Court upon the request of the Arkansas State Prosecutor's Office. At 6:15, a special task force consisting of Boone County Sheriff's deputies, FBI agents, and personnel from the Cold Case Division gathered at the Eureka Springs Police Department to execute the operation. The arrest warrant specified 4 charges, 3 counts of first-degree murder, under Arkansas Code Section 510-102, corresponding to victims Earl Miller, Mark Ortiz, and Daniel Green, and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence under Section 553-111. At 7:02, the specialized convoy proceeded onto Maple Hollow Road to the wooded residential area where Caraway lived. 2 officers knocked on the door, announced the arrest warrant, while the support team sealed both entrances' exits. Caraway appeared after a few minutes, wearing a gray shirt and old jeans, showing no signs of resistance. When read his Miranda rights, he simply stated, "I understand." The officers instructed him to place both hands in front, handcuffed him, and escorted him to the patrol vehicle. The entire arrest process was recorded by body cameras and FBI mobile cameras to ensure legality. At 7:25, Caraway was transported to the Eureka Springs Police Department for booking and temporary detention. The report noted, subject arrested without resistance, cooperative, emotional state calm. Meanwhile, Kelton monitored the entire operation through the internal feed from the Harrison Command Center. Upon receiving confirmation of suspect in custody, she stood up from her desk and looked at the investigation board on the wall, where the 3 victims' photos were arranged in a horizontal row. The complete chain of evidence, fingerprints, ballistics, DNA, 3D reconstruction, had been finalized, and now the last man of the Joyita had officially been taken into custody after 13 years. At the police station, Caraway's fingerprints were taken again for comparison. The results matched perfectly with the sample lifted from the vessel's control panel. The preliminary charging document was read to him that same morning, including the following. Reed Caraway, age 56, charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence in connection with the deaths of 3 crew members of the MV Joyita, occurring on the night of October 3, 2005, on Beaver Lake, Boone County, Arkansas. The state prosecutor's office requested no bail, citing the severity of the offenses and the risk of evidence destruction. At 10 o'clock, Caraway was transferred to the Carroll County Detention Center, placed in solitary confinement in Unit B. In the report sent to the Arkansas Department of Justice that same day, Kelton wrote, "Warrant executed August 20, 2018. Subject Reed Caraway arrested without incident at residence Eureka Springs. Charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence." When signing at the bottom of the report, she added a small handwritten note. "The boat has surfaced. The last man on board has finally been brought back to shore." The formal interrogation of Reed Caraway took place on August 21, 2018, 1 day after his arrest. The interview began at 9:15 in interview room 3 at the Boone County Sheriff's Office, in the presence of Detective Sarah Kelton, FBI Special Agent Mark Hanley, and an appointed public defender. All recording and video equipment was checked and activated at the start. In the opening phase, Caraway was again advised of his right to remain silent and his right to counsel. He confirmed he was willing to cooperate. Kelton began by asking about his relationship with Captain Earl Miller. Caraway replied in an even tone, "We worked together for many years, no personal issues." When Kelton presented copies of the falsified fuel invoices recovered from his home and compared them with records from Benton Marine Supply, he remained silent for several minutes before saying, "I don't remember. Maybe someone reused an old template." Next, Kelton presented the ballistics and DNA reports, pointing out that the bullet in Miller's skull was a perfect match to Caraway's Colt .45, and Miller's blood was found on the utility knife recovered from his garage. Caraway looked down at the table, exhaled heavily, and said, "I don't know how it got there." The interrogation continued for nearly 2 more hours. His answers remained evasive, denying that he had shot anyone. At 12:10, Kelton displayed the 3D model of the Joyita's cabin on the screen, showing bullet trajectories and the sequence of victims, explaining in detail that only someone familiar with the vessel's layout could have cut the power, disabled the radio, and set the engines to idle drift. Caraway sat silently, hands clasped together. At 13:05, Kelton asked, "Were you present on the Joyita when Captain Miller died?" After a long silence, Carraway answered quietly, "Yes, but not the way you think." He began giving fragmented statements that on the night of October 3rd, Miller had confronted him about missing fuel, threatening to report it to the company and the police. The argument took place in the wheelhouse. Carraway said Miller didn't understand and kept shouting. When Miller tried to grab the gun from the cabinet where he usually kept it for self-defense, Carraway claimed he reacted instinctively. He fired at close range. The bullet struck directly into the back of the captain's head. He added softly, "I only meant to scare him. I didn't intend to kill him." After Miller collapsed, crew members Ortiz and Green rushed up in panic. In a state of panic himself, Carraway fired 2 more shots in quick succession. "Everything happened too fast. I don't remember how many shots rang out," he said, his voice trembling slightly. When asked about his actions afterward, he admitted to cutting the radio wires because he feared someone on shore might hear and mistake it for an accident. Then allowing the vessel to drift into the middle of the lake. He opened the engine room bilge valves to make everything gradually sink. Carraway stated he had prepared a life jacket and a small collapsible dinghy hidden in a compartment, using it to leave the Joyita about an hour after the shooting. He admitted to fabricating the boat caught fire story to explain his survival. When Kelton asked why he had not turned himself in during the 13 years, Carraway only replied, "No one would have believed me if I said it was an accident, and I thought the lake would keep that secret forever." The interrogation concluded at 15:20. The record stated, suspect Reed Carraway initially denied involvement, later admitted to shooting Captain Miller during dispute over missing fuel, followed by firing upon Ortiz and Green in panic. Confirmed manual disconnection of radio and intentional flooding of vessel. Admission recorded and signed. Kelton read the entire statement aloud. Carraway signed it without requesting any changes. Before leaving the room, he spoke only one quiet sentence in a low voice, "Joyita couldn't sink, but I already have." In the comprehensive report to the Arkansas Department of Justice, Kelton noted, confession obtained, 6-hour interrogation, sequence, and motive align with physical and forensic evidence. In September 2018, after Reed Carraway's final statement was signed and all forensic evidence chains were duly authenticated, the official prosecution file was completed and submitted to Boone County Circuit Court under Arkansas criminal procedure. The file, over 400 pages thick, bore the case number State of Arkansas versus Reed Carraway and included the indictment, confession transcript, ballistics reports, DNA analysis, 3D crime scene diagrams, and all evidence seized during the search of the Eureka Springs residence. State Prosecutor Ellen Barksdale was assigned as lead prosecutor, working in coordination with the U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure federal standard compliance due to the multi-county nature of the case. On September 5, Ms. Barksdale read the indictment in court. Reed Carraway, age 56, charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of tampering with physical evidence. In connection with the deaths of Earl Miller, Mark Ortiz, and Daniel Green, occurring on October 3, 2005, aboard the MV Joyita on Beaver Lake. The prosecution highlighted 3 main groups of evidence. First, physical evidence, including the .45 ACP bullet, matching the defendant's Colt government model pistol. Second, biological evidence consisting of victim's blood DNA on the utility knife recovered from the residence. And third, testimonial evidence comprising the full 6-hour video-recorded voluntary confession. Additionally, the FBI's 3D crime scene reconstruction was attached as an illustrative appendix. On September 10, Carraway was transferred from Carroll County Detention to the Boone County Holding Facility pending trial. During his first meeting with defense attorney Mark Ellison, he maintained his position, it was all an accident. The defense argued that Carraway's actions were impulsive reactions under extreme stress, with no premeditated intent to kill. The prosecution rejected this, citing the rear head shot on Miller, and the deliberate disabling of the radio and intentional drifting of the vessel as evidence of intent and consciousness of guilt. On September 18, the court issued the preliminary trial schedule, setting the main trial for March 11, 2019, at Boone County Circuit Court, with Judge Richard T. Mahoney presiding. Pretrial procedures included verification of evidence admissibility, chain of custody confirmation, and approval of FBI examination copies. Barksdale requested that all original physical evidence be sealed in the cold case division vault, with only digital copies to be used in court to prevent damage or loss. In an internal report to the Arkansas Department of Justice dated September 25, she wrote, "All forensic evidence admissible, confession voluntary, defense strategy relies on emotional mitigation, not factual contradiction." Kelton, as the prosecution's primary witness, was required to prepare the complete investigation file and courtroom presentation. She spent 3 weeks reviewing all materials, from Hank Pritchard's 2005 logbook, the 2017 evidence re-examination records, to the Joyita cabin simulation. By the end of the month, all preparations were complete. The witness list of 14 people was finalized, including 2 ballistics experts, 1 DNA expert, and 1 3D sonar engineer. The official court notice issued on October 1, 2018, confirmed trial scheduled for March 11, 2019, Boone County Circuit Court, State of Arkansas versus Reed Caraway. In her work journal that day, Kelton wrote briefly, 13 years, 8 months, and 8 days since Joyita went missing, the case finally enters the courtroom. The trial of State of Arkansas versus Reed Caraway officially opened on the morning of March 11, 2019, at Boone County Circuit Court, presided over by Judge Richard T. Mahoney. The jury consisted of 12 members, selected from the local citizen list, all of whom swore to maintain impartiality. The prosecution was represented by Ms. Ellen Barksdale, while the defense was handled by attorney Mark Ellison. The courtroom was packed with reporters, members of the public, and former police officers who had participated in the 2005 investigation. In her opening statement, the prosecutor presented the case as one that had been buried at the bottom of the lake for 13 years and could only be brought to light through forensic science. Ms. Barksdale emphasized the key points. The .45 ACP bullet found in Captain Earl Miller's skull matched the rifling perfectly with the defendant's Colt government model. Miller's blood DNA was found on the utility knife recovered from Caraway's residence. 4-point fingerprints of the captain were found on the cut radio wiring, and the voluntary confession confirmed the acts of cutting the radio, opening the scuttle valves, and letting the vessel drift. When the FBI's 3D crime scene reconstruction was projected onto the large screen, the courtroom lights dimmed, and the image of the Joyita cabin appeared clearly, with the 3 victims falling one by one along the bullet trajectories. The jury watched intently as the prosecutor described. Only one person remained on board, the one who understood machinery, knew how to disable communications, and left in the small skiff. That person is sitting here. Defense attorney Ellison countered that Caraway had not planned to kill anyone, that the shooting was an impulsive reaction during an argument, followed by panic and attempts to cover it up. He stated, "The defendant is not a premeditated murderer. He is a frightened mechanic who was backed into a corner." On the second day of trial, the prosecution called its first witness, Detective Sarah Kelton, who presented the entire process of reopening the case, DNA testing, ballistics examination, and evidence collection. She detailed each phase of the investigation, how the blood sample was identified, and why the severed copper wire proved the radio had been manually disabled. When asked by the prosecution, "Do you have any doubt that anyone other than Caraway was responsible?" Kelton answered firmly, "No, all physical evidence points to one individual." The trial lasted 11 days, with 32 pieces of evidence presented, including ballistics reports, crime scene photographs, and the recorded confession. On March 18, the prosecution delivered its closing argument, stressing the financial motive, the conflict over fuel fraud, and Captain Miller's threats as the direct cause of the shooting. The jury was asked to consider 2 options, murder in the first degree or manslaughter. On March 21, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom with a unanimous decision. Judge Mahoney asked the jury foreman, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood and replied, "Yes, Your Honor. We find the defendant Reed Caraway guilty of first-degree murder on all 3 counts, as well as guilty of tampering with evidence." The courtroom fell silent. The defendant sat motionless, hands clenched tightly. The prosecution requested immediate sentencing. Judge Mahoney read the preliminary judgment. The defendant Reed Caraway is found guilty on all counts. He struck the gavel, concluding the trial phase and announcing that sentencing would take place that same afternoon. In the internal court record, the clerk noted, "Verdict rendered March 21, 2019, guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of tampering with evidence. Jury unanimous." Detective Kelton left the courthouse at dusk, carrying the first copy of the Joyita case verdict, with the bold header clearly stating, "Verdict guilty." On the afternoon of March 21, 2019, after the jury unanimously found defendant Reed Caraway guilty of first-degree murder in the deaths of 3 victims and guilty of tampering with evidence, Boone County Circuit Court proceeded to the sentencing phase. Judge Richard T. Mahoney presided, with prosecutor Ellen Barksdale, representing the state of Arkansas, and attorney Mark Ellison, representing the defendant. The courtroom was filled to capacity, including relatives of Captain Earl Miller, as well as the families of the 2 crew members, Ortiz and Green. A heavy atmosphere prevailed as Judge Mahoney read the opening portion of the sentence. "This case has spanned 13 years, 3 innocent lives were taken, and justice was delayed far too long." He summarized the entire matter, from the disappearance of the MV Joyita in 2005 to its recovery in 2018. The ballistics and DNA results, and Caraway's recorded confession. The judge emphasized the defendant's actions were not an impulsive reaction, but a calculated sequence, shooting the captain from behind, killing the other 2 to silence them, then disabling communications and scuttling the vessel to conceal the crime. Attorney Ellison requested leniency, citing the defendant's long period of cooperation and frank admission. The prosecution rejected this, stating clearly that cooperation only came when the evidence was overwhelming and cannot be considered voluntary remorse. After more than an hour of consideration, Judge Mahoney pronounced sentence. The court, on behalf of the state of Arkansas, sentences defendant Reed Caraway to life imprisonment without parole for each count of first-degree murder, to be served concurrently, plus an additional 20 years of imprisonment for the offense of tampering with evidence. He struck the gavel 3 times, formally closing the longest criminal case in Boone County history. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Several victims' relatives burst into tears. Caraway sat motionless, eyes fixed on the table, showing no reaction. When asked if he had any final words, he said quietly, "I didn't intend to kill them, I just didn't know how to stop." The judge entered into the record, the defendant expressed remorse, but accepted responsibility. After sentencing, Caraway was escorted out of the courtroom and transferred to the Arkansas Department of Correction Varner Unit, which houses inmates serving life without parole. At 3:30 p.m., Judge Mahoney signed the order, closing the case file, marking the status solved for Case 05 AR 217. The official judgment was entered into the state judicial system, with the summary, Reed Caraway, guilty on all counts, sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, plus 20 years consecutive for evidence tampering. Local media ran the story that same evening, with headlines uniformly reading, "Last Joyita crew member, sentenced to life in prison." At the Cold Case Division office in Little Rock, Kelton received a copy of the decision and filed it into the 13-year thick case folder she had pursued for nearly 2 years. In the final internal note, she wrote, Case 05 AR 217, status, solved. Judgment, life imprisonment without parole, plus 20 years for evidence tampering. Court, Boone County Circuit, March 21, 2019. When she closed the file cover, the red solved stamp stood out boldly against the gray cover, bringing formal closure to a case once considered permanently lost, at the bottom of Beaver Lake. Now given its final voice by law and justice. In May 2019, nearly 2 months after Reed Caraway's sentencing, Detective Sarah Kelton was assigned to complete the final investigative summary report, titled Case Summary Report, 05 AR 217, an internal document used to evaluate the entire case-solving process and identify the reasons the 2005 matter remained stalled for over a decade. The report exceeded 60 pages and opened with the simple heading, Investigation Review. The Joyita homicide case. In the initial section, Kelton compiled the timeline from the disappearance of MV Joyita to the case being closed in 2006, then reopened in 2017, thanks to DNA STR technology. The core of the report focused on the 3 main reasons the original investigation failed. The first cause, evidence processing failure. In 2005, the first aid kit containing Captain Earl Miller's blood was collected, but never DNA tested, due to technical limitations and lack of request from County Command. Had the sample been properly preserved or sent to the state crime lab at the time, the victim's identity and the true nature of the case could have been established 12 years earlier. The second cause, analytical oversight, failure to cross-reference radar and meteorological data. Kelton pointed out that the hydraulic radar log from the night of October 3, 2005, recorded Joyita's last position, but was never cross-analyzed with wind coordinates and drift direction. Had this been done, the discrepancy in Reed Caraway's reported location when found would have raised immediate doubts about his statement. The third cause, interagency coordination failure, lack of coordination between local and federal levels. In 2005, Boone County had no access to national databases, resulting in fragmented checks of fingerprints, prior fuel fraud convictions, and Caraway's firearms records. Only when the case was transferred to the Cold Case Division and coordinated with the FBI were these pieces linked into a complete logical chain. Beyond the 3 primary causes, Kelton also noted smaller but systemic shortcomings, insufficient preservation of the scene, failure to duplicate radar data before suspending the search, and lack of digital archiving of sonar images. She concluded, the Joyita investigation failed initially not because of lack of effort, but because of procedural fragmentation and outdated technology. The following section presented proposed solutions. Kelton recommended that the state of Arkansas issue new standards for evidence preservation in water-related missing persons cases, including mandatory DNA sampling from all unidentified bloodstains and storage at the state level, rather than county level. She also proposed building a real-time linked database among lakeside counties so radar logs, weather data, and communication signals could be automatically shared. Finally, the report recommended enhanced training for county-level investigators in water scene processing skills because, as Kelton wrote, when investigators leave the shore without knowing how to read sonar signals, much evidence will remain forever on the lake bottom. On May 18, 2019, the report was submitted to the Arkansas Department of Justice and received an Outstanding Investigation Review evaluation. A copy was sent to the State Police Academy for use as training material. In the appendix, Kelton attached the original 2005 case cover sheet by Hank Pritchard with the still visible notation, closed, accidental sinking. Below it, in green ink, she added, lesson learned, it was never an accident. Upon completing the report, she looked out the office window at Beaver Lake, calm under the spring sun, its surface as flat as it had been 14 years earlier, only this time, everything beneath it had been seen and understood. On June 30, 2019, after Detective Sarah Kelton's case summary report was approved, and all recommendations for improving investigative procedures were forwarded to the Arkansas Department of Justice, the MV Joyita case file was officially reclassified within the Cold Case Division system, from active investigation to solved cold cases. This update was recorded in the state database under code ARCC 512JY with the new status line. Resolved, conviction secured, case closed. The remaining physical evidence from the case, including the Colt .45 pistol, tactical knife, original DNA samples, and copies of forensic materials, was transferred to the Beaver Lake Regional Evidence Storage Facility, which provides long-term storage for fully adjudicated cases. After completing technical examination and decontamination processes, the Joyita vessel was moved to a secure, climate-controlled warehouse of the Boone County Sheriff's Office, placed on a steel rack in an isolated area with controlled humidity. The hull still bears the faded gray Joyita lettering at the stern, with a preservation label affixed above reading, Evidence Exhibit 2005-2019. The decision to preserve the vessel was signed by Judge Mahoney, with the purpose of serving as forensic training material and archival evidence for future waterborne crime investigation research. On July 5, Kelton, together with FBI representatives and state police, conducted the final inspection before sealing the warehouse. She walked along the hull, looking through protective glass at the control panel, still showing the cut copper wires and the clock frozen at 22:25, like a motionless witness to the night of October 3, 2005. In the inventory log, she recorded, "Vessel preserved as permanent evidence. No further analysis required. Investigation complete." After signing the handover confirmation, Kelton closed the final case document box, the nearly 500-page thick gray file, containing the entire 14-year investigative journey. She affixed a new label, Cold Case, Solved 2019, to the spine, and placed it in slot 14 row D of the Little Rock archive. On July 12, the Cold Case Division summary report was released internally, stating, "The MV Joyita case serves as a model investigation for federal-state coordinated efforts. The complete resolution process demonstrates the effectiveness of modern forensic technology and long-term evidence management." The report was accompanied by a thank you letter from the Arkansas State Police Director to all participating personnel. At the end, an official note from the Arkansas Department of Justice confirmed, "Case File 05R217 is hereby closed permanently." That same day, the electronic file was sealed, with all data archived on the secure Cold Case Network server. Kelton printed a final copy of the file, placed it in a separate envelope, and kept it in her personal cabinet. She looked at the Joyita one last time before leaving the Beaver Lake warehouse. The afternoon light, reflecting off the dust-covered hull, making the silver paint shimmer faintly. Standing at the door, she signed the handover log with a brief note. "Final check complete. File closed." As the steel door closed, the electronic lock clicked coldly, marking the complete end of a case once considered permanently lost. The 14-year investigation was officially concluded, and within the Cold Case Division system, among hundreds of other cases, the code ARCC 512JY now appears in the unique green color, Solved. The story of the MV Joyita case, from being regarded as a technical accident, missing vessel in 2005, to its complete resolution in 2019, reflects a profound aspect of contemporary American life: faith in science, transparency in the legal system, and the enduring value of pursuing truth. 14 years of investigation, with initial mistakes such as failing to test blood samples, not cross-referencing radar data, or lacking coordination between agencies, serve as a microcosm of how society sometimes overlooks the smallest details, and it is precisely that which delays justice. However, the emergence of STR-DNA technology, the Cold Case Division system, and the determination of investigators like Sarah Kelton have proven that, in a rule-of-law society like the United States, no truth is buried forever. When Beaver Lake receded, when the Joyita was raised, it was not merely the physical image of a solved case, but also a metaphor for the belief that justice may arrive late, but it never disappears. In today's America, where technology, media, and data increasingly dominate life, the lesson of the Joyita case reminds every citizen, from those working in the public system to ordinary people, of the importance of honesty, responsibility, and perseverance in pursuing truth. Whether it is a small detail in work overlooked data, or a concealed act of deception, any of these can become the starting point for either tragedy or justice. Be persistent, precise, and ethical in everything you do, because like the Joyita, truth may sink deep, but it will always resurface when its time comes. Thank you all for following this journey to restore justice for the Joyita, a case that shows truth can be buried, but never truly disappears. If you want to continue exploring more mysterious stories revealed after years of silence, please subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video.